The idea was to just make sure that you are aware that every aspect of trucking cases is different than car wreck cases. And it's where it's sort of the starting mentality we have to have. And it's everything from your intake to the way insurance works, to the way the truck works, to the way the dynamics of a crash happen, to what you should expect to be seeing in trucks in terms of their technology built into the truck, the technology that gets tacked on afterwards in the form of telematics systems, the way these cases are handled much more aggressively. You remember insurance and all of the various, we get calls a lot, and those of us who do this a lot get calls a lot in situations where there are catastrophic cases and the first layer of insurance or what's being reported is insufficient. And so we've become pretty good sleuths for different ways to find coverage, and sometimes it's looking for coverage in places that if you're an auto wreck lawyer you don't consider, like I remember the first time I discovered that there's separate insurance on the actual chassis, that when you have sometimes you'll have a case where a load came out of the ports and it's a shipping container, and the shipping container is just clipped onto a chassis. And I remember it was terrible insurance. I had a mom and pop, so I literally had a $750,000 policy and 4 people who suffered and then died. It was one of those things where you're just looking everywhere. And that's when I learned that, when you think about it, this is just how different the industry is. That's why I'm telling you the story. Imagine how difficult and expensive it would be to ship all those little chassis all over the place and to manage all of those chassis. So it's a separate company that owns and manages all of those chassis, and everybody else just signs on and what's called a trailer interchange or a chassis interchange agreement. So they get to just, hey, I got a container there, there's a chassis over there, I can grab that chassis and use it, and I can move it to the next place, and I can just dump it off wherever the hell I need, and then the next person who needs it over there will pick it up. But I found that chassis company had $150 million in insurance. And the other beautiful thing about the way trucking insurance often operates, unlike all of us negligence lawyers, is oftentimes you don't even have to prove negligence. Like in that case, there was nothing wrong with the chassis. The chassis company did nothing wrong. But contractually within the insurance policy, it said if this chassis is attached to another commercial motor vehicle in transit or under dispatch, this coverage is just secondary coverage. And so I was like, hallelujah. I mean, I just went from $750,000 in coverage to $150,750,000 in coverage. And I like that number better, yes? Okay. All right, so the point is the cases are very, very different. And I like to start every presentation with just a moment to remember that and to get framed and get sort of centered around that concept. Beyond that, we're now going to, yesterday we spent time showing you a little bit, Jay and I, when he wasn't posing for the camera, oh, I'm sorry, Jay. No, I'm teasing. Jay and I tried to walk you through a little bit of our mental process when a case comes in or when we're getting ready to take a deposition, how we walk through the process. And just for a real quick reminder of this, and I promise you I'm getting to my topic because this is my topic, applied from yesterday, right? So the process was to do a couple of things. One, it was to work when it comes to deposition time, in the preparation for the deposition. We went through all those processes about intake and what we're looking for and those types of things. But then when you're in the deposition itself, the goal was to get people off the fence on 2 things: the key facts that you need for your case, because they're going to want to stay on the fence on those facts. Like if you don't ask a specific enough question on a case involving a sideswipe, you're not going to know exactly where the car was, the last time the truck driver saw the car before it disappeared into its blind spot. You're not going to know. And so if you don't know, if it's not in the deposition, then come time for trial, you're not going to know. It's very, very difficult to prepare your case. Or, and what you get in terms of the lawyer response to those kinds of questions from the defense is very ambiguous. because they'd rather be ambiguous because they don't know where you're going. So their job is to stay ambiguous, and our job is to get it nailed down. And I jokingly said yesterday, but it's really not that funny of a joke, I'll read my own depositions that I've taken, and I'm like, what dumbass took this deposition and didn't get this locked down? And then I look and I go, it's me, right? So I'm not professing that I'm somehow some superstar when it comes to that. I think that it's important for us to know that's really our job. At the end of the day, none of us get to try enough cases to, we're more deposition lawyers than we are trial lawyers, aren't we? I mean, that's the reality. So what can we do best in those moments? And our job really is to be thinking in advance, what are the facts that I need to make sure they take a position on? And then from there, we get to the second part, and you could say this is a fact, but it has to do with the rule. What rule are we going to, first the internal process before I get to the deposition, what am I going to say the standard of care was? What was that truck driver and that trucking company and whoever else may be involved in the transportation of those goods, what was the requirement on them that was clearly violated in this case? And I don't need 100 of them. In fact, I don't want 100 of them. Even if I have 100 of them, I'm not going to focus on 100 of them. I'm going to pick my best one or two, and that's what I'm going to run with. But I've got to get that person, whether it's the truck driver, the safety director, the corporate representative, I want the official position on, you're either going to agree with me that this is the rule, in which case what? I know I'm picked the rule that's violated, right? I don't want to fight about it. I don't need to fight about it. If you agree with me that it's the rule, then my trial narrative is, everybody agrees this is the rule, it's clearly violated, I win, right? But what happens when they say, no, it's not the rule? Old Joe used to get mad and try to beat them into submission. I bet I'm not alone in this room, right? I bet there were a lot of old Joes in here, all right? I mean, so now I've evolved to a point where I've realized, wait, it's even better. All I got to do is change the trial narrative to these people are either pretending like this isn't the rule to try to defend a lawsuit, or worse, or maybe the other, I don't know which one's worse, or they don't know. They don't know the damn rule, and they're running 100 trucks through our community every week. And all those drivers don't know the rule, and they're not forcing, so you can see what the trial narrative can be at that point, right? So those are the things, but I've got to, but how do they play with us? They want to stay on the fence. Just try this. I mean, I hope that the next deposition you take, and frankly, this is true whether it's trucking or anything else that you do. I think this is what our job is in deposition. They watch how they try to stay on the fence in these cases. Watch how they try to not take a position. Watch how they try to, it depends. They give you the lawyer answer back. Well, it depends. Well, generally, yes, but, right? If it's a general, the answer's got to be, I agree, I disagree, or the answer's going to be, I don't know, or the answer's going to be generally, or some kind of equivocal answer. If it's, I've talked about agree, I've talked about disagree. If the answer is it depends, then what does it depend on, ma'am? What does it depend on, sir? Let's talk about all of the things it depends on. Anything that you need to be able to answer this. And then we just add those criteria to the question. So in a case where it's dark, it depends on how light it is outside. Okay, well, in our case, it's dark. How about, will you agree with this rule in situations where it's dark? Well, it still depends. Well, what else does it depend on? Well, it depends on, is the road straight or is the road curved? Okay, well, in our case, the road's straight. So let's say it's dark and the road's straight. Is this the rule? Well, it depends on, and finally they get to exhaustion. And they go, it depends on how many damn questions you're going to ask me, but you see what I'm doing. But the old me was not that good. I'd lose my train of thought in the middle of it. I wouldn't see all the things. And so I'm asking you to be better than I was in this process and force them to take the position one way or the other. Make sense? Okay. What's the last, let's see, I said yes, no, I don't know is the last one, okay? So now you've got options with I don't know, right? You can say, well, I appreciate your honesty about saying you don't know. In the back of my mind, what am I thinking? I'm thinking, what's the world going to think about that? Is it okay for them not to know, or is it not okay for them not to know? And then I'm going to think about how do I want to play this? I've got options. One of the options would be is okay. Gosh, I'm surprised you don't know. So does that mean that you don't expect your drivers to know, right? And now I'm pushing that down to the driver level, or it's the driver, and I'm saying, gosh, I'm surprised you don't know. You have 1 million miles of driving. And so then what can we do with that? You can do all kinds of things. One, you can now assume the posture of teacher and say, well, let me ask you. I mean, you're the driver. I'm just the lawyer, but I'm looking at all these industry materials like this CDL manual. Sure, and it says this. I mean, or you can say, what would be a good place for us to look? If it wasn't a lawsuit and we just wanted to find the answer to that question, what's expected of drivers in this situation? What would be some good sources for us to look at, right? And if they don't know, then you start saying, well, when you went to truck driving school, what'd you use? What'd they use there? When you went and got your CDL license, you remember that book, the CDL manual? Yeah, that's just written for you guys to learn how to take the test, to know what the basics are, right? That's kind of trucking 101, right? Right, well, look, I happen to have it right here in my back pocket. It says this. You wouldn't disagree with that, would you? Okay, so I'm going to push them. I'm going to push them on it. Or if it's a corporate representative and the answer is I don't know, sometimes I'll say, is there anything that I can do to give you so that you'll know? What are you going to do? I'm going to ask you this question again in about 8 or 9 months when we're in trial. Are you going to still not know at trial? I mean, don't you think it's important to know? Where are you going to look to find out the answer? And sometimes I'll say, are you willing to make a commitment today, before the end of today, to find out the answer? Do you need to call somebody? I said, let's take a break. Go do whatever you need to do. Come on back and we'll talk about it. Okay? Boy, they really don't like it. The defense lawyer, we only have, I said, it's just one little question. Who are you going to call? You want to tell me who you're going to call, or you want to just go make the call? I don't care either way, right? You want to look at something, I can give it to you. Maybe you can converse with your lawyer, decide what you guys want your answer to be. That's fine with me, right? I just need you off the fence one way or the other. And so with that kind of intro and recoup of yesterday, then we'll move into these specific cases. So and I want you now to see the focus of this session is where are the rules for these cases. And so I've probably covered some of these things, but remember we also talked yesterday about the concept that we start with, that they are different than us. This is not true if it's a truck-on-truck case, but if it is a truck-on-truck case, and by the way, if you weren't here yesterday or if you don't remember, all of these slide decks will be made available to everybody. So you're free to take pictures of them. I see some people doing that. But know that you will have these slides. I'll make sure that TLU has them, and that way you can relax into the hopefully just thinking through this as we go through it. All right. So the us versus them. What are we doing there? Remember, in the deposition, we've spent a little time talking maybe about what it's like to do a pre-trip inspection, even if it's not a pre-trip inspection case, because we want to show that their world is different than our world. We don't go and do a pre-trip inspection before we drive our car out of our garage every day. They have gone through weeks of training, full-time school, after they had their license for 10 years. And they're they got their same driver's license we all have, and then they have to go to 3 more weeks of school in a truck driving school, take a test on that pre-trip inspection, take a test on general knowledge, and then take a test on the road. And then they have to take more tests if they want endorsements. The most recent truck driver in America is sitting right here, CDL holder right here, Tim Whiting, who some of you will be in a group with a little bit later today. We, through the academy, of truck accident attorneys which is I'm self-promoting, so forgive me. It's an organization that I co-founded with Michael Leeserman out of Ohio. It's a nonprofit organization that's designed to teach us to be better at what we do. It's a community for people who do this. And one of the things that we did is several years ago, we contracted with a truck driving school out in Montana, and we take lawyers there every single year to go through the training of what it is to be a truck driver. And some of them go on to get their CDL licenses just to have the pride of having done that. It's a challenge. If nothing else, you can back the hell of a boat much better. I mean, you're really good at it, right? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm reminded it's $50 off if you join the academy today. And what is it? What is the whole thing? Is it $350 normally? $395, so it's about $345 today. Forgive me for the self-promotion, but that's a nonprofit organization. I don't make any money from it. It's really designed to be an organization for people who do it, and it's gotten great legs now. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Yeah, we have a document bank that has hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of documents that we got a listserv that's amazing, where people will post a question that's a rank beginner question or a super advanced question, and the best minds in trucking right now, by the time you wake up the next morning, you'll have the answer from incredible people who this is all they do. All they do, because we have no other life. We just live for the listserv. And we fight over who can get the answer first a little bit. Sometimes it's kind of interesting to see. Yes, sir.
If you are a member, you should be.
Yeah, you can join here. But yeah, I didn't mean to get that far off, but it really is. If you do this with any degree of regularity, or you happen to just get into a case and you need the membership for the duration that you're in that case, the resources there are really second to none. We're up to about close to 1,200 members, and it really that includes really the people in the United States who are the folks who really do this for a living, and it's great. Like, imagine if you got a new case and you could log in somewhere and already get the deposition of a safety director from that company and all their discovery materials from another case. I mean, it's almost not fair. I hope that didn't get picked up on the camera right there. But that's the point. So we start off with that they're different than us, right? Why are we doing that? Not just we're doing that for obvious reasons from a jury perspective, but we're also doing it because that difference, those differences that we're going to focus on are the why. They're the justification. Give me one sec. They're the why, and they're the justification for why the rules are different for them. The rules that we're going to talk about here are not the same as what we do when we're driving our cars and SUVs. And so we don't want anybody to ever think that we're just picking on truck drivers. Nanny, nanny, boo-boo, you got a more significant, burden than we have. So there's a reason, there's a safety reason behind these rules, and those safety reasons are born out of the differences in what it is to drive a truck. Yes, sir.
Is this a concept that you would consider introducing during your board hire?
Of course, yeah. But I'm not waiting till then, right? I'm setting all this up in the deposition. And also, and this is a really important thing, it sounds subtle, but it's not. I'm also walking into every aspect of my case from the time I'm looking at it to the time I'm trying it from that mindset. So I've got to put myself in the mindset of this is not a car case, and it's fair for me to hold. Sometimes, in some cases, I'm holding that truck driver. I'm trying to say that that truck driver did is wrong when my client did the exact same thing. How can I do that? How can that be fair? I've got to be able to educate people to show them why it's fair. Make sense? So, these are rule cases, these are document cases. We've talked about these things on here. And again, it's all about credibility at the end. So the goal is do all the advance work before the first deposition, and then the first depositions are going to be, and we can talk about the order because I don't think it's always the same, but it's going to be the truck driver and either the corporate representative, the truck driver, I'm sorry, the safety director for the company or the corporate representative. And sometimes those are one and the same when it comes to the safety specific issues, and then they'll add another person to talk about, the other topics that you might add to a 30B6 notice or a PMK notice if you're in California. So the goal is by the end of those first deposition or two, it's case over. At that point, they cannot recover from it. And you've done all the work in advance, and what I found is even as long as I've done this, and I'm at a point in my career now where I say things like, tell me, sir, what did you do to prepare for this deposition? And they say, I read 6 depositions that you took. I'm like, shit, I got to come up with new content. But here's the beautiful thing of the process that I'm talking to you about. You can hide in plain view. You're doing absolutely this is the righteous way to practice law. You're not tricking anybody. You're not playing some game with anybody. This is really, we're taking their materials that their industry put together for the purpose of their own education and their own edification on how to operate, and we're using those materials. How can we lose in that situation? As compared to what we used to do and what we do in so many other parts of our plaintiff lawyer life, we hire an expert. Well, let's be honest. We can hire an expert to pretty much say anything just like they do to us, right? So a jury appropriately views expert testimony with some degree of skepticism, don't they? I mean, wouldn't you, if you were on the jury? You'd still listen, you'd still learn, you'd still make a credibility assessment for yourself. But what if what the expert's saying is agreeing with what the actual defendant said or what the industry says? So let's get specific now into left turns. Okay, so we're now talking about left turns specifically, and maybe we'll move, and so what's going on in a left turn? We're going to go through the rules, but why would rules be different for a truck versus a car, right? I mean, we know the truck's bigger, right? We know the truck's heavier. We know the truck accelerates slower. We know it takes longer just by virtue of that slower acceleration rate and that big, long truck and the weight of it. We know it's going to take longer for it to complete the turn. We know that we know they're going to need more time to clear. Think for a minute. I'm curious if those who have never thought about this before, how long do you think generally it takes for a truck to complete a left turn? And when I say complete it, I mean for the rear of the trailer to clear the lanes of travel. Like let's say it's a two-lane road coming in each direction, and the truck's just making a left turn there. I'm curious. What do you think? From a stop, not from a rolling. I've got a good head of steam up. How long do you think? 12 seconds? A minute and a half's long. It's not that long. But you're close. It's somewhere around 15 seconds. And of course, it can vary a little bit by the load and by the truck and how new it is and how, the skill of the driver who still has to manipulate. Remember, they're going through gears a lot differently if it's a manual transmission. They're going through. They got double clutch as they're doing it. So it takes a while. Imagine how long do you think it takes to do a U-turn in a truck? I mean, forever. If you can complete it. If you don't have to do a K-turn or a multiple backy and forthy thingy. It's a technical term that truckers use, backy and forthy thingy. Okay? But then what happens when you even completed the U-turn? Now you're still a hazard because you're going slow. You're almost stopped. And you got to get up to speed before someone comes and knocks the crap out of you. And by the way, while you're making that U-turn, if you try to turn too aggressively, depending on which way you're trying to do it, you may rip what are called the glad hands, which are your connections to your air supply that go between the tractor and the trailer. You may rip those. You may kink those. You may have all kinds of problems. That's why and because it takes so long, and the general rule in these cases, as you're about to see, is driver cannot begin to move in any way, whether it's a turn or anything else. They cannot begin to move if their maneuver is going to obstruct the path of other traffic. So you can't begin a left turn until and unless you can complete the left turn without causing other traffic to have to take evasive maneuvers to miss you. So that's why for a U-turn, it's really impossible to do it if it's not a controlled environment, because you can't see far enough ahead to be able to complete the U-turn without vehicles being able. It's almost like beginning a left turn if there's a crest of a hill a couple hundred feet ahead of you and you have no idea what's coming over the hill. That's the same thing. And so if a driver does that, what's happening in that situation? They're turning blind. They have no idea. And the burden's on them, because that's what the law does. It puts the burden on them in that situation. So the good thing about these dangers and these risks, and by the way, if it's at night, it's even more, right? Because now we have all the issues about nighttime, it's called conspicuity, but it's much more than that. I mean, just as a general thing, think about it as a human being, right? It's just a lot harder to see. And one of the defense's favorite things to say is, how could they not see that big-ass truck, right, in the road? It's big and it's silver or it's white. And here's the truth, and you'll see. I'm going to show it to you. The industry says people miss them all the time. The industry says something about the limitations of being a human being when we're driving. We don't see them at night. That's why there is DOT tape on them. That's why these things have to be silhouetted in the night in a way that wake our brain up for us to recognize it. There's a lot of science behind that. But the science is born out of the reality that the industry has known forever, that it's actually really hard to see that big-ass truck. But we have to be the educator of that, right? And imagine how little credibility I have as a plaintiff's lawyer, just generally, I can stop right there. But as a plaintiff's lawyer in a case that involves a left turn where my client underrode the trailer, how little credibility I have standing up and saying, I've got a great expert who's going to come in and say it's really hard for us human beings to see the side of that truck. Okay? Of course I'm saying that. But how different is it if what I can do is I can stand up and say, let me show you, I'm not going to say anything, let me show you a few industry documents, and then I'd like to have a discussion with you. And I can show things that go back into the 1970s that talk about the dangers of left turn. And I can show their own preventable accident manuals, which are manuals that are put out to teach people in the industry, in the trucking companies, how to evaluate the conduct of their own drivers. And I can show it says right in there, don't assume people are going to see you. People don't see you. It's your job. You can't ignore that. It's your responsibility. It's not me saying it, and it's nobody I bought and paid for who's saying it. Do I change the credibility balance in that situation? I think it's night and day, right? It's very, very hard for them to have it. And so the good news is, with all of these risks that we're talking about, is the training materials, the rules and the training standards address those. And so that's the way I like to talk about it, really, if we were talking even in a jury situation and as applied within a deposition, right? There's different rules, yes. Differences in how you operate a truck, yes. And the why behind it is as we've talked about it. So getting specific, we're going to do it. And I already talked about this. We're going to do all this work beforehand. So a lot of times we'll get up on a stage like this and we'll say the topic is deposing the truck driver. And the person gets up and they sit down and they start to talk and they say, okay, so we've set the deposition and we walk in the room. Well, boy, if that's where you're starting to think about taking the deposition, in my view, you've missed the whole point. We've got to do as much of the work up front so that we know it's not a fishing expedition. I mean, I hope there may be a few things I'm fishing on in a deposition, bless you, but not a lot. I mean, I know where I'm going to go. I've built an algorithm in my mind of where I'm going to go. If they go this way, I'm going this way. If they go that way, I'm going that way. Those fence points we talked about, if they go this way with the facts, that's okay. If they go this way with the facts, I got to go a different way. If they go this way on the rule, and you've already seen me up here demonstrate that algorithmic kind of approach, right? Even knowing in advance, I know he or she has got to take one of 4 positions as to a rule. They either agree, they disagree, they say they don't know, or they say it depends, right? Somebody might know a 5th one. But in my mind, I already know where I'm going. I don't care what the answer is. I don't attach my ego to any of their answer. They give the answer, I know where I'm going to go. It's not a fight. We just go that way. We got to have the flexibility. But I would never have that if I hadn't thought about it in advance.